Hello and welcome once again to our virtual author visit. Today we have Janice Hisle on the phone or on the video phone with us. Hi Janice, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing really well, thanks.
Okay, great. Sorry, we are of course stuck in our own homes, and we're struggling with technology. So thank you for dealing with our technology issues. I am down in the technology center, ironically enough. Anyway, so let's get to this interview or this talk. Janice, can you give a short bio, a little description of your life, how you got to where you are now, maybe?
Oh, geez. Well, I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version.
Right, right.
So I decided when I was really little that I decided when I was really little that I wanted to be a writer, and I did pursue that dream throughout my whole life. I ended up going to college for journalism, and I stayed in that profession for a long time. And I felt like I was going to stay a journalist my entire adult life. However, the problem happened with the internet coming along and a lot of changes in industry. There were many, many rounds of layoffs. I worked for several newspapers in Ohio, making my way down to Cincinnati. That was the last paper that I worked for, the Cincinnati Enquirer. I was there for 15 years. And while I was there, I survived 5 rounds of layoffs,
Wow.
which was very difficult circumstance, because those who leave, you feel terrible for them. And those who stay, like I did, you have much more work to do and much more pressure, and you have survivor's guilt that you weren't laid off. You feel bad because maybe someone has small children and I didn't, and I felt terrible for those people. So I could see that it was only a matter of time before I was going to be laid off. So I quit my job with the encouragement of the man who's now my husband, and decided to try something a little different. I went into a completely unrelated field. It was a sales related job, which the funny thing is I didn't want to sell Girl Scout cookies when I was growing up. So going into a sales job, a difficult thing for me. I did that for 3 years, and then I had some more opportunities present themselves to do some more writing. The Associated Press hired me to cover some trials, and because that was kind of what I became known for at the Cincinnati Enquirer, is covering a lot of trials. And my husband said, just quit your job, write your book, do as many freelance jobs as you can. And he knew it was in my heart to write a book about the Ryan Whitmer murder trial case, which I covered all 3 trials for the Enquirer. I was there all day, all 3 trials, and for a time I was kind of Whitmered out, but it never left my mind. I was always wondering about this case, and I felt like that I wanted to try to reinvestigate it and see if I could answer some of the questions that plagued not just me, but a lot of people who followed the case. So that was how my first book resolved it.
Okay, yeah, let's move on to that. That's great. So the first book is Submerged. And for those of our viewers or listeners who might not be familiar, can you sort of briefly summarize why this case is so odd and strange?
Well, it's a very unusual situation, number one, to have any case go to trial 3 times. The only case that I found that went to trial more times was one that was 6 times in another state. I think maybe Mississippi, I'm not 100% sure. But the other thing about this case that's so unusual is that it's either a murder or it's a medical problem that went completely undiscovered that caused this young lady to drown in her bathtub. And the very interesting thing about this is, despite 3 trials, there was never really a motive established. Why would a guy only married 4 months drown the woman that everybody said he was crazy about, loved, in the bathtub?
Mm-hmm.
There were several theories that were put forth, but there was never any evidence in the affair. So that's one of the mysteries of the case, is if this guy in fact did do it, why did he do it? Nobody ever really completely answered that. And there was no life insurance. There was none of the usual motives that you would think of in a case like this. And the other thing was, there are a lot of questions about the health of Sarah Whitmer, the young woman. She was only 24, drowned in her bathtub, but she had a history of falling asleep in odd places. For example, I talked to a woman who saw her at a Cincinnati Bengals game in the middle of the day, falling asleep in a crowded football stadium. You might think that maybe there was some alcohol involved or something like that, but it's still kind of odd. It's a loud, people are cheering. Why would you fall asleep? And she also would go out to her car and sleep. And she was just very sleepy for being 24 years old. Well, a lot of people don't realize that narcolepsy is not just you uncontrollably fall asleep. It's actually the definition of excessive daytime sleepiness, which according to people who knew Sarah, it sure sounds like she did suffer from that. Now, whether she was narcoleptic, we may never know, because guess what? No tests were ever done. Right. And why does that? Because 80% of narcoleptics may have something happen called cataplexy, which is where you become paralyzed. All of your voluntary muscles, you lose control of them, but you're still breathing. Imagine if that happens when you're in a bathtub, the result might be bad.
That's horrifying.
That's one of the theories about Sarah Whitmer. Yes.
And
so that's one of the questions that is still.
And you covered, so you said you covered all 3 trials, which, as you said, in and of itself is pretty unusual. And you covered it for the Cincinnati Enquirer. And then that obviously you couldn't get out of your head, and you had to write Submerged from that experience. Is that about right?
That is absolutely right. There probably hasn't been a day that's gone by that I haven't thought of this case some way, because I actually live fairly close to where everything happened. And even just seeing my own bathtub, I think about it.
I saw an interesting detail from, I think it's from your book, that rock lyrics were entered in as testimony for this case.
Yeah. Yeah. There was, it's kind of a long roundabout way, but it's very odd that at one point there was an allegation that that Ryan Whitmer was acting out a fantasy from some rock song by Motley Crue. And he said he didn't really even listen to Motley Crue. So it's just very rare that a set of lyrics from a song would end up as evidence in a murder case.
Right. It's really interesting, because I remember, I mean, obviously that, for me, as a musician, that calls back to all of the, the PMRC and those trials. It's very odd for lyrics to play a part, at least a tangential part, in a murder trial. But this case has always been bizarre, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's no surprise that
there are so many.
Oh, sorry. It's no surprise that you dug up a lot of information. You were known to be, and I think I'm quoting from someone, they called you a bulldog reporter for the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Yeah, I was kind of known for, ever since I was a small kid, being driven by curiosity. And in my job at the Enquirer and at the other newspapers where I worked, I was known for being a real document digger.
That's excellent. Did you, that's an interesting transition, because, so I was thinking about Submerged, and I was thinking about, I mean, obviously it falls neatly into this true crime genre, but you're not just a true crime author. Your next book was quite a departure. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and maybe how you got there?
Actually, yes. So I write the Whitmer book. It became a really good success by most measures. Most people aren't aware that independent authors really face an uphill battle in terms of even getting your book on a shelf. You stand about a 1% chance of having your book stocked in a bookstore from what I've read with some independent author organizations. And so my book was stocked at several bookstores. So that is that did make me feel really good and legit when you see your book on a shelf. So what happened, somebody ended up reading Submerged, the Whitmer book, really liked the way it was written. They knew that the family of Mary Jo Cropper was looking for a biographer. And as unlikely as it might seem, that family approached me and we had some discussions and I ended up going for it. I was a little hesitant because I didn't really know anything about Mary Jo Cropper. I didn't know anything about the disease that unfortunately ended up taking her life, cancer. And it made me a little leery to even delve into cancer. But I just decided, I think that this project has probably come to me for a good reason. And I was familiar with Mary Jo Cropper's family. The name is actually well known in the Lebanon area. She was married to Robbie Cropper. And that whole family was connected to the Corwin family, which was one of the establishing families of Lebanon and Warren County. And also, her dad was Ralph Stalley. Now, almost everybody in Lebanon has heard of the Stalley countryside. Why? It is named for him. And so, in a long story short, I ended up deciding, yes, I'm going to take on this project that came my way because God bless my husband, he encouraged me because he said, you've written biography, you've written personality profiles before, you've written obituaries, and you've written business stories. So this is just kind of like a giant combination of all three of those things. And that's what it became. So I wrote the story of Mary Jo Cropper and how the center that she established at Bethesda North Hospital came about.
That sounds really fascinating. For those of our listeners who might not be familiar, once these videos get out, sometimes they get out to all kinds of places, maybe people who aren't from Lebanon. Could you briefly describe Ralph Stalley and his contributions?
Yeah, so Ralph Stalley, he in and of himself is an interesting man because he was a self-made multimillionaire. He originally grew up in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and he always had a drive to work really hard, ambitious, and just a great idea person. Ideas always churning in his head. In fact, he was known for his ingenuity, and there was a book written about his life by another author. That book's called Ingenuity in a Can, which I think is a great title, considering that his biggest legacy, other than the why, was that, beverage cans, the pop top that allows you to drink a can of Coke or maybe a nice cold beer. He came up with the machinery that enabled the pop top to even exist. So that was one of the major things, but this man held many patents and actually supported cancer research. So it was very ironic and quite sad that Mr. Stalley only had 3 children, 3 daughters. All 3 of them came down with breast cancer, and they never found a genetic link. So I think most people would find that to be very interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you explore that in the book on Mary Jo?
Oh, most definitely. It's toward the very beginning of the book. I even traced their family history back. Remember I said I was a document digger? Well, I actually went through a lot of the health departments in Ohio and Kentucky to get death certificates for relatives of Ralph Stalley. And I was able to document that they were experiencing 1 cancer case in their family every 8.5 years, dating back to the 1930s.
Wow. Yeah, you really your background in journalism it really shines through in these books because you really do dig up some fascinating facts and details about these people.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But it's not enough to dig documents. You have to be able to talk to people. And when I do interviews with people, I try to make it more like a conversation because I think that when it's just me firing questions at someone, that it doesn't feel right. There's an imbalance there. So I do try to make it kind of like a conversation, and that is a technique. It's just my personality, but it's kind of a technique too. But it seems to work well for me because I'm able to get people to open up to me. And then I have that rich detail of personal experiences and great quotes from people to go along with the information that I dig out of the documents. And so it just makes the story so much more enriched by having all of that detail. And you really need to be able to do both, to interview people well, really listen for what they're telling you, and really ask great follow-up questions, which unfortunately I feel like a lot of news reporters don't know how to do anymore.
Right, right. I agree with you. And I'm really glad that you said that. A lot of our author visits, the people that come and come to the library and the people who watch them online, I've found that a lot of them are budding authors themselves. So I'm really glad that you gave some advice. I'm really glad that you put some of that wisdom out there for people. And I also wanted to add that it's not only the digging up of facts, it's not only the interviewing, it's you're writing. You really craft a story around this. It's not just a recitation of facts and figures. Your writing is really very compelling.
Wow, I am so complimented to hear that. It's an interesting blend, I think, to be a really compelling writer, that you have to be pretty cerebral, but you also have to write from the heart. You have to write in an organized fashion, but yet convey emotions, describe expressions on people's faces, create a mood, for example, sometimes. The details matter so much. For example, in the book about Mary Jo Cropper, one of the chapters that it actually left me exhausted, the chapter where I talk about her passing away and then the subsequent chapter, her funeral, because I really transported myself mentally to experience that as best I could as a person in hindsight interviewing other people. And it was an exhausting thing to mentally experience that with people. So again, it's a combination of having enough organization that you're writing like in an organized manner, but yet you're writing from the heart.
Right, right, absolutely. So Submerged was the book on the Whitmer case. Comforting Light is the book on Mary Jo Cropper. Do you want to talk about anything you've got coming up next?
Yes, actually, I have several ideas in the works. I always do. But then the next book that I've done a little bit of research on, I can tell you that it is something that has gnawed at me since 1996. It was a criminal case that I actually covered for the Dayton Daily News. And it's another one that's a little bit of a mystery to it.
And that's all we can say right now.
Yeah, right now. So that's all I'm going to say at this moment. But it's really such a great experience to have written both of these books that are so different. It has given me so much more confidence in my own ability to say I'm not just a true crime writer, even though crime was the big thing that I was had the most expertise in, the most maybe affinity for. But then to do the Mary Jo Cropper book and to see that I would like the listeners to know that all the proceeds from this book are going to the center. And in less than a month, we did raise more than $7,000, which it makes me feel so fantastic to be part of that. And it's going to go for some new technology at the center, which will enable the doctors to better read the mammograms that are done to see if there is a sign of cancer, that it will aid in better detection rates. And also, sometimes a woman or even men, you need to know, men actually sometimes get mammograms if they have something suspicious going on. They sometimes have to call them back and say, there's something we're not sure about, was supposed to cut down on that callback rate, because a lot of times those people who are called back, they're terrified, they get there and then it turns out to not to be anything. So it's supposed to really help the doctors to interpret the mammography in, it's called profound AI, an artificial intelligence type of technology. So that makes me feel good that that money is going toward that.
Well, that sounds great. Yeah, and that, you said that's just the first month. So this book will continue to generate funds for the organization.
Yes, absolutely. It says it right in the front cover that the proceeds all go to the Mary Jo Cropper Family Center for Breast Care. So that makes me feel fantastic.
And yeah, it's a great cause. Janice, thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. And I think we're all looking forward to the next book. Obviously, our readers will be waiting, and maybe if they'd like to make some comments on the thread and try to guess what the next book is about, I think that'll be a fun little detective story. Thank you, Lebanon Public Library patrons. Thank you, viewers of our page. Thank you for being with us for another virtual author visit. Stay safe, take care, be well.